Hey, man.
Hey, thank you for having me in your place. What
We're
a
here, man.
setup!
We're doing it.
What a setup! I mean, this for everyone listening or watching, we've been working on this setup now for yes, it's what 1 p.m. now. It's 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty no 2 p.m. we started actually.
Yeah. So the goal was you were going to arrive at 12. We were going to start recording by 2.
Yeah,
And I think I said and then let's just say we'll probably start recording at 5.
right.
And you were like, oh, no, well, surely. And then you were running late. I was running late.
Yeah.
We had lunch. We were hanging. I've got these 2 cats you've met for the first time.
Yeah.
We were hanging out. We were setting up and it's now 5.
Yeah.
So
Good time.
these things always take longer, man.
Hey, but that was
Yeah. It's all good.
It was fun also, and I got to meet your cats.
Yes. And they love you, man.
Oh, I love them. So
Yeah.
if I love them already after a couple of hours, I'm sure you know.
Oh, it's like yeah, it's deep, man. When you hang out with the 2 little cats and then you start to build a relationship. We've had them since they were kittens as well, so
That's nice.
big. So we're here to do this sports show.
Yeah.
Sports related and sports entertainment.
Right.
And
we don't have a name yet.
We don't have a name right now.
Yeah.
By the time this goes out, I reckon we will have a name.
Right.
And the reason that we wanted to do it was because we've had so many good, fruitful conversations over the last few months.
Yeah.
Since we started working in the same co-working together.
Yeah. 1 month, actually.
Is it even only 1 month?
I think it's only 1 month.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe like 5 weeks or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Ah, cool.
It's nuts. And then we didn't know that we love sports so much. We did watch Champions League final last year.
Last season, yeah.
PSG versus Bayern. That was one game we did watch. But other than that, we didn't know that. Like, I didn't know you were a WWE fan until last week.
Yeah, basically. I can't remember.
This week.
What was the...
It was this week.
Did you ask, are you into...
No, we were in the kitchen, and then you mentioned something about WWE. I forgot what it was, but you said, "Oh, it's not like the WWE." WWE, and then we talked about it, and then we realized we both loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're lightly a fan,
Yeah.
or you were a fan, and then you've kind of still watched occasionally, or how? What's your situation with it?
I played the game a lot.
Okay.
And I used
Which game?
On PSP, the wrestling game. I don't know what it was called.
PSP.
But it was produced by THQ, which I think belongs to 2K.
So that's in 2005 or something.
Yeah, 2006, 2007. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm not sure if I played so many of the games that late. I played
before.
SmackDown versus Raw, Know Your Role, Bring It On.
Know Your Role. What's that?
Yeah, SmackDown Know Your Role. And Know Your Role was The Rock's catchphrase at one point. It was in 1998 or something like that. And you could they had TLC matches. They had street fights, and you have the kendo sticks, and you could beat up a car, and it just had all the classics like Steve Blackman and Road Dogg and all this stuff.
So you're super into
man.
WWE.
I'm into pro wrestling. I like WWE. I'm not such a big fan of their product right now, the main product. But we need to get into that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can.
Yeah. So I love. It's weird. Basically, I started watching pro wrestling when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. Way back when it was WCW at the time, and at the time it was.
But there was a different league, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So WCW and WWE had a war for years, and they were competing for the Monday Night dominance, the Monday Night War. And WCW had really good talent when I started watching it. So it was Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Perry Saturn, and Hulk Hogan, Sting, Scott Steiner, all these big names.
Wait, they were in WCW?
That was WCW.
Rey Mysterio was in WCW?
Yeah. I started watching Rey Mysterio for the first time. He was probably one of the guys who I've I would say I'm the biggest fan of going back. Oh. And I was in WCW initially. He was actually unmasked as well.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Doesn't he look a bit like a kid? He looks very young.
He's got a baby face.
Right, he does,
he's got a baby face.
Massive body.
But sometimes he's the heel.
Oh,
That's an in joke.
Okay. So how do we? So we planned so we're both comics. We love comedy, but we love sports, obviously, and that's a cool thing. We both love a variety of sports.
Yes.
So this is not just going to be about football or wrestling, about basketball, anything, NFL,
Yeah.
everything.
I think we should just keep it loose because
Yeah.
every week there's like 20 things that I like to watch.
Right.
So it could be wrestling, it could be football, it could be rugby, it could
Right.
be fighting. You and I
Yeah.
both like watching MMA, boxing,
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
no-gi grappling, all this stuff. And
Do
and
you watch that?
yeah.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a complete loser.
Maybe that's the name we were thinking about.
Yeah, we got to think about this name. We've got like what was the other one?
Locker room losers.
Locker room losers. Yeah. Like basically, I was just like quite lonely for a long time as a kid.
That's or wrestling.
Got you know, it's like a kind of like a comfort to watch it every week, and you get into the characters and all that stuff.
Right.
And I definitely put it down at one point, the wrestling. Like I think I was about like 17, 18, and I was like, oh, I'm kind of like done with it. The product at that time was also becoming quite like silly and slapstick. And I loved like the Attitude Era, you know, like when it was like almost like obscene stuff that was on the TV. And then in like the early 2000s, that kind of vibe. And it just totally changed. And then I just kind of picked it back up. Like I can't get far away from it. Every time that I think like I'm done with it, oh, I'll never watch it again. Then a year later, I'm just like flicking and I'll see it and I'm like, oh, well, that person's now doing well. Like, let's get into it again. And then little by little, you start to read the storylines and so on.
Right.
And now what they're doing is kind of crazy. Like they obviously have like Raw and SmackDown, which is like the same flagship shows before. And then they had they always had a developmental squad, like a team who are being taught how to become superstars and all that stuff. And they did even like Tough Enough. I don't know if you ever watched that.
No.
That was like another sort of reality TV approach into like how to get into the WWE. So they filmed like like the Ultimate Fighter in MMA, in the UFC.
Like the competition show?
Yes, and then they filmed them in the house and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
They did that in Tough Enough. And then that, as far as I understand, this might not even be correct, but that sort of morphed into this league called NXT. They also had they always used to have this thing called like Ohio Valley Wrestling, which I didn't live in the States for very long, so I never went to any of those shows, but they were like underground, kind of like semi-pro shows. And that's where they would like grow the stars when they were like unknown.
Okay.
And then they started to put them on this show NXT, and then they started to actually televise NXT. So it became an actual little brand. For a couple of years, it was not that big. It was just kind of like another thing that the diehard fans were watching. And then it really changed, and I think it was like, I'm trying to think, like maybe like 2018 or something like that. No, maybe even earlier. More like 2016, 17, 18, like around then, it became like as big a show for the fans, for the hardcore fans, as the main two shows. Yeah. And then they even got to the point where they had like these things called like NXT TakeOver, which was like a pay-per-view of NXT. And I was more excited about watching that than any of the other ones.
Right.
Because it's run not by Vince McMahon, it's run by Triple H. So it's a completely different style, different brand, much more like Attitude Era vibe, right. A bit more about the wrestling and really pushing the characters and growing them and creating this awesome thing that's converse. It's like a slightly different style to the normal brands, which are much more, they're definitely for like the kids audience. You know, you see a lot of like kind of like slapstick and like too many segments and all this stuff, whereas like, yeah. So dude, that's the kind of like loose summary.
Yeah, sometimes, because we're in this dynamic, especially for wrestling, where we both have interest and love it, but I don't really know that much about it anymore. But you, or at least in the past, you followed it a lot. So with this thing where, you know, you just mentioned the heel, and I didn't really understand. I know there's heel and something else.
Yeah, so there's the usual, typical, old school way of looking at it was there was heels and babyface. So heels are like the bad guys, and babyface are the good guys.
So Rey Mysterio was a bad guy?
At some point, he's been a bad guy.
Oh.
Everyone usually has a go at both.
Okay.
And what used to, I'll talk about like traditionally what used to happen is they would pick, they would usually push you in as a good person, and then you build up your fan base as someone who's trying to get applause, and then you do a heel turn where you become the bad guy on screen, and then you start to harvest the hate as your character.
Right.
And then what happens is that this was probably true still at the time, but I was young, so I wasn't wise to it. That the fans start supporting the heels very often. So like when someone's a really, really good bad guy, the older fans are kind of like, they've gone past the kids' approach of just following the good and the bad, and they just start applauding for the bad.
Oh, just follow his journey or her journey.
Exactly. Or the show is trying to push someone as a good guy,
right,
and then the fans are just like, we just don't want to support this guy as a good guy, so they boo them.
Oh shit!
So it's kind of like a protest.
So they control the narrative, kind of, right?
Who?
The fans. I mean,
it's a dichotomy.
Okay.
Because like sometimes they'll push someone as a thing and it doesn't work, and then the fans kind of like don't respond, and then for years, like there's a perfect example like Roman Reigns. You mentioned him as well, the big guy, like he's related to The Rock,
right.
And their cousin or nephew or something like that. And he, for years, was being pushed as a face, as a good guy, the hero. And the fans just never grasped that. Like he was like so not accepted as a face that every time he came out, it was like rapturous boos. Everyone booed him. Only like he had like some kids following him, but 80% of the audience was all boos. And for years, they kept pushing it down the throat. He's a face. He's a good guy. He was like winning things. Like there was like a couple, like a Royal Rumble where he came in at the end and won it and went to WrestleMania, and everyone was like,
"Oh, is that how you get to WrestleMania?
If you win the Royal Rumble, you get to fight the guy who's the champ." Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wait. So Royal Rumble is when 30 people or something.
Yeah, 30 people go in one by one.
Right.
And it's an over-the-top battle royal.
Until 6 are allowed to be in it at the same time.
Any amount are in.
Oh, really? 30 people?
You technically have, but like obviously people are getting thrown out. But there's times where there's like 12 or 15.
So, wait, okay.
I love it. We have so much to talk about.
yeah, that's a bit. Wait, so how does it? I have to just check with them. So I think it's allowed.
No, you're not. It's cool, man.
Okay.
We can always adjust.
Okay.
Don't worry.
So wait, how does it also work? Because obviously it's a sport, but also it's entertainment. So
okay.
Because I just wonder if there's 30 people, how do you coordinate how a fight should go?
So what I've enjoyed in the last like 5 years or so is that they've done this thing where they've called it, this is like WWE specifically, they've called it like lifting the curtain. So they now are, so in my childhood, our childhood, when we were watching it, we believed that it was real, right? I believed it was real for years, for years and years. And I thought at least if they knew what the outcomes were, that it was still a real fight.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like a 100% it could go anywhere fight.
Right.
But what we're all privy now to the behind the scenes thing, because they do interviews not in character. They talk about their character in interviews.
Really?
Yeah. And they do like a show, they did a show like the behind the scenes of NXT, where they show them like choosing their character, growing and having arguments like as talent and not as the star. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas in the like late 90s, early 2000s, even then, and before that, there was like some real dramas. There was a thing called it's escaping me right now. When we edit this, there's going to be a little like ding that says what it was. But it was like a few of the key wrestlers at the time did a bow, or like they kind of put their hands up and kind of waved at the audience together, even though they were enemies.
Oh.
And it was a proper like incident drama at the time. This is like late 90s. You had a live show.
Okay.
And so that kind of like people were like, what? And then there was sometimes like people would get pictured together in a car because all the wrestlers would drive to the different shows together and stuff like that. It was a really like quite a big deal to keep the secret. Right. But now it's an open secret. Okay. So everyone knows that the matches are predetermined. But what's also really, really cool is that you now see the intricacies of the craft and how much of a gymnastic dramatic endeavor this is. And when they hit each other with a chair, they really fucking hit each other with a chair. It's like painful.
Yeah.
And they do these incredible stunts. And like, obviously the goal is that you're always supporting the other person. It's like a dance. It's not that you're fighting each other. It's that it's called like working the other guy or the other girl.
Okay.
So it's like for you get kind of put together as a team for the next run. So like you're going to do a whole bunch of matches, then have a pay-per-view together.
Right.
And you have to learn each other's styles and give each other the opportunity to do your spots, they're called, like in comedy, where it's like, I have this thing that we go off the ropes. So they probably train that 100 times. And then in the match, they probably have a set list of what they want to do, or this is my understanding. It's like, we're going to get to these points, and then there's a constant communication between the two and the ref. The ref is key.
Right.
So the ref is always relaying information. So they'll say something to the ref. So the ref will be like, stop, like, get off the rope. And then he'll hear something, and then he'll go over to the other guy and be like, da 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 da, and then say the message that needed to be sent, and then they know like what the next move will be. And this is probably like, if anyone who's an actual pro wrestler watch this, they might laugh and be like, oh, this guy doesn't know his thing. But
that's what we think.
That's what my understanding of it is. It's a choreographed dance, and there are times where they know where the next moves are. There's times where they don't. There's times where they're kind of like picking it.
Right.
And there's times when, for example,
so they're improv artists actually
as well.
Right.
It's for me,
so
it's
like jazz, I guess.
It's like jazz. It's like jazz, comedy, gymnastics, like shoot fighting, like real legitimate hurting each other, and 300 tour dates per year.
Gee, really?
They don't sleep. These guys. They're just in the tour zone for 300 days out of the year. Yeah. So every time they're not doing a televised show, they're doing a house show. It's called, which is like just a non-televised wrestling event.
Really?
Yeah.
Like
all over the world, they just tour.
But it's not filmed?
It's probably filmed, but not televised.
Oh.
It's not part of their main show.
Oh, so that's a different story.
Well, they usually use the same storylines, but they also like experiment at those ones, because they can say, we have a live audience here. Maybe we've planned in the flagship show to do this outcome.
Right.
And then we can just like play around with a few different things and see, like, let's say I've got a new spot, or I've got a new, whatever.
So, okay, so what do you do if, because I think John Cena, when he started, he wasn't that popular, and then they kind of modeled him or whatever, and then he became really popular. Same with The Rock, I believe, right? He first
Sure.
came in like a yellow. Have you seen that?
Yeah. It was like a old school style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then they made him into like the black tights, and then this kind of like badass a bit, right? Mm-hmm. But cool. And then he like, didn't he? Wasn't it like that?
Yeah. So I think often they bring in a character as something, and it doesn't quite hit. Okay. I think Cena was brought in initially as a heel. I remember when he debuted, he was brought in as a bad guy, and he was like a street thug rapper, thugonomics, all this kind of stuff. And he did get some heat. Like, heat is when you, it's when you cause a reaction in a good or bad way. So
it's like a lexicon of
and then he got over, it's called. Like in comedy, you can also get over with an audience. It's like when they appreciate you for the thing that you're trying to do, whether it's good or bad or whatever. Okay. But then they turned him into a face, and then he became like this kind of superhero. Right. And that, again, it's like, it seems like the fans, like especially the older fans, don't like it when there's this superhero guy or girl that's always thrust down your throat as like the perfect, like, it's what like the Hulk Hogan of the time. Right. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas people like that kind of heel aspect, heel face, and not just someone who wins everything.
Right.
That's
boring.
It gets boring. Yeah. Exactly. It becomes so predictable.
Right.
And that's why I'm someone who's, I can't quite believe this, but I probably watched wrestling on and off for like 26 years or something like that.
That's fun. That's cool. I mean, who's your favorite wrestler?
It's a tough one, man. It's a real tough one. I have a bunch that I like. Rey Mysterio is one I have to put, because I remember him from the first times I was watching WCW. He was unmasked, and then I saw him masked. I shook his hand once at an event. What? Yeah, so I went to like a local house show in Scotland way back when, and he kind of like hung around, and I got his autograph. So like I was only like 12 or something at the time, and that was like, wow, I've met Rey Mysterio. Right. Like really cool. And I loved
That was after a fight, like
after the show.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
they kind of just came to the front bit where
Wow.
people were kind of milling around, and so many, man. I've always loved. Um, I mean, we could do like a list of like 10 or 20, but I'll just reel off some names. So like, I loved Kane always, and he just got inducted into the Hall of Fame like 2 days ago. We're coming up to WrestleMania weekend and NXT Takeover weekend.
I don't know what that means actually.
So I'll fill you in on both. So that's what's cool about this show is like there are some things that I know more about that you don't know as much about, but you're still interested.
Oh yeah.
And you know way more than me in NBA, like current NFL, and like a whole bunch of other stuff. So I think that's what we're gonna we're both gonna learn, and it's gonna be great. Like this is awesome, man.
Also the bit, I mean, there's so many sides to to sports, like the business side, the coaching side, the recovery side, even like everything is so interesting. And but yeah, sorry.
And memorabilia, betting, all this stuff, man. Souvenirs, or like like the training side of things, the performance side of things, the grind, the business, like growing, and like now we're seeing a lot as well from people who've left the WWE, who've gone to this other place called like AEW. It's another now legitimate competitor to the WWE at the moment, and it's run by Cody Rhodes.
Oh yeah.
And Chris Jericho and a couple of others who are like big names. They know what they're doing, and they're giving the talent more power within the show, because they're basically, I think what I understand is their ethos is, we know that these people that we bring on board are the top elite of the world of wrestling. So we don't need to say, you have to say these words in your script, or you have to do this move, or you have to do this growth pattern. They want to allow the stars to kind of develop themselves in their own way.
So my question is, because also before with you're creating your character, right? How do you become? Because what if you enter the WWE? That's a huge chance, and then you only get a shitty character, and you don't want to play that character. I guess you just have to, right?
I mean, I'm only answering these things as a fan, right? So I've never been a pro wrestler or even an amateur wrestler, but from what I understand, having watched it for so long, there's a few people who have had really bad gimmicks given to them and have been able to turn them into winning gimmicks. There's people who have been given bad gimmicks who have always had the bad gimmick and then just faded away. And then there's people who have had bad gimmicks who then manage to fight out of the gimmick and then become something else that's even better. Right. Perfect example is Kane. The first gimmick that he had was called Isaac Yankem, this like evil dentist.
What?
He was like the sidekick and enforcer for Jerry the King Lawler at the time. Okay. So do you remember the commentating team? It was JR and Jerry the King.
Oh, okay.
So Jerry the King, when he was a wrestler, he had this enforcer, Isaac Yankem.
Wait, is it JBL? No, that's...
JBL was John Bradshaw Layfield, who's
like an investor or something.
So he used to be in the APA. Do you remember them? Him and Farouk, Ron Simmons.
Ron Simmons. Wait, Ron Simmons? No, that's the band, right? Gene Simmons. Sorry.
Gene Simmons. Yeah. Also have had a little bit of a hand in wrestling at times.
Okay,
I think.
Like with a billionaire battle, that thing.
So
that something else? No, that's something.
No, that's you're thinking Ted DiBiase and the billionaire, the $1 million.
Yeah, who's that?
$1 million man, $1 million.
Is that the game, the fight where they have to grab for the suitcase?
So that's the Money in the Bank.
Money in the Bank.
Yeah, Money in the Bank. Yeah, this is cool, man. Hell in a Cell. You've got your Money in the Bank. Now, I love Money in the Bank. I think it's a great concept. Yeah. They brought that in as a one-off, and I think they've just kept it for years now. So it's like it's a contract in a briefcase for a title match whenever you want it. So you always have this kind of looming part of the story that someone has money in the bank. So even when there's a title match and there's a win, I'm always like kind of like waiting just in case, just before the end of the show, he'll just cash in and bring it and attack the guy who's just had a full match. Oh, and that happens a lot.
Really?
Often. So very often they do this thing where they have like a tried and tested bad guy who everyone knows to hate, and they love to hate him.
Right.
They make him Money in the Bank. So he has the Money in the Bank championship, the contract.
The bad guy.
This tried and tested guy
Right.
who they don't want him to be the champ forever, but he's someone that could legitimately be a champ. So they give him the Money in the Bank contract, and then they have a match between an up-and-coming bad guy and an up-and-coming good guy. The up-and-coming good guy wins it, and then they'll bring the tried and tested guy to take it away in this kind of like crooked, dirty way.
Okay.
So then they've got a path to make the good guy get it back, and you need that. You need the good guy to be fighting against the man and like like the establishment of this thing. It's like, oh, and I got screwed, and all of those things add to your over time, and then you build it, and that's what I like is when they build the story, when they don't just like randomly do something, and you're like, that makes no sense. Like I've been watching this thing for like 4 weeks, and 3 weeks ago you said this, and like it's almost like as a fan you feel like you kind of you can just see these things happen in the storyline. Do you know what I mean? It's the same with any fan fiction. So for example, when a new Batman comes out and they're like, and he has this attribute, and everyone's like, what the hell? Batman doesn't have that, or King Kong is way too big in this. You know what I mean? Who says how big King Kong should be? It's there for some reason. These things grow a life of their own, and then the fans kind of realize things are happening in a non-clear way, and they're very vocal about it. Especially wrestling fans are particularly vocal. So yeah.
So what was okay? Two things. Okay, what was one incident where you got riled up? Really, you were like, "What the hell?" I'm sure that.
Yeah, it's happened. Definitely, like when I was younger, like for sure, like teens and stuff. I remember. So like when I was really in, and I was kind of like in a sort of blurry. Is it real? Is it not? How much of this is story? How much of this is da da da?
That was 2 years ago.
Oh man, yes. It was like 2020. No, so I was probably I was still at school, so I was probably like mid-teens, maybe like 14, 15. And it was JBL who was on this long run as champ, as bad guy champ. And he was so good at being a heel.
He's like a Texas cowboy.
Exactly. So he revived his career. He was this part of this duo called the APA, the Acolyte Protection Agency.
Acolyte, what does that mean?
I'm not even sure, man. It was like, and it was like these two like bruiser dudes with like leather straps on their biceps, and he had long hair, and Farouk, who was like Ron Simmons for a long time, classic wrestler. They were like, you would pay them, and they would like protect you. That was their gimmick.
Okay.
And he did that for years as like these two bad guys. And then he suddenly just appeared as JBL, this like money investing Texan billionaire character. And they used it so well that like he was like anti-immigrants, and they would like put him on the border, like kicking, literally fighting immigrants who were trying to cross into America, and like all this stuff. They built up this whole thing about like how much of a like asshole he is, basically. And it was like this whole they built up this whole character that was so hateable that I loved to hate him, right? So I was in. They got me. So when for years he was champ, I think he was champ for like 700 days or 1,000 days or something like that. It was a long time. Wow. And I was watching the pay-per-views waiting for the story to change. So it's not that I knew that it was fake. I knew that they had me.
Right.
But I was young enough at the time to be like still like come on, go Rey Mysterio. It was Rey Mysterio. It was other people who I can't remember, like who were trying to get him, Undertaker, all these like guys who were like like brought in as the person who's going to beat JBL. Right. And they never quite got it. And there was always these interesting ways that they did it. So there was one where it was a cage match. So a cage match is not the Hell in the Cell, but like let's say the walls of the cage are actually just part of the ring. Okay. So the idea of it is that it's got no top, and you can win either by pinfall or submission, like a normal match, or by escaping the cage and then both feet touching the floor.
So getting out,
okay. Essentially. And I can't remember who the opponent was. I think it was maybe Big Show.
Oh man, legend.
Big Show, who's just moved to AEW, by the way.
You said, yeah, which is shocking.
Big move.
Oh,
big coup for them.
Is that his new name?
Literally.
Actually, okay. This is the most iconic fight scene I've seen, wrestling scene. That I watched it so many times over the years, but I love it. It's Brock Lesnar versus you know exactly what I mean against Big Show. Do you think that was coordinated?
I think it was.
It was.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know, like what do you call when they go into the corner and then jump off?
Brock did a superplex on the Big Show.
Right.
So like Brock Lesnar, who's all of 300 pounds,
right.
did like a superplex of the Big Show, who's like 500 pounds, and they both land on the thing, and then the ring caved in, and then all the ropes break and stuff, and it's part of the show. It's cool,
and even the ref is like falling down.
The ref is so key.
Right.
The ref is a really important part of the show. He sells things. Right. He makes the audience think that like. That this guy is really bad because he's not following the instructions, or this guy's really good because he's shaking his hand. That whenever they do like big things, he always goes and checks, and everyone knows this now because of the opening the curtain thing. When there's been a big move, he'll go and be like, just go in the storyline and go and check on them, and then touch their hand. And if the wrestler doesn't grip back, then it means that he's actually hurt or she's actually hurt.
Right.
But if they do a little grip back, then it means it's all good, and they're just now selling that they're in pain.
Right.
Or they are actually in pain, but they're like good enough.
How do you know that?
Like just as like a fan, because it's now known. These little things like are kind of open.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Also, when they hit, they always stomp on the floor, right? So that it makes the noise.
Yeah, there's all that kind of stuff, and but having said that, like the chest chops and certain things that they do are really actually the reason that they're so loud is because they hit you properly. It's those are like shoot moves. It's called like a shoot is when there have been occasionally shoot matches where it's two people actually fighting.
Like really fighting?
Like having a real wrestling match.
Okay.
There was the really famous one was like Daniel Puder. This is like a little bit nerdy, but
what about this is not nerdy, right?
Exactly.
I was talking about anyways, yeah.
So there's this guy, Daniel Puder, who was an MMA fighter, an actual MMA fighter, who was
in the WWE,
who was on Tough Enough as a contestant to become a new superstar, right?
Yeah.
He goes on a match, and it was meant to be a shoot match with Kurt Angle, who's a real Olympic wrestler. Right. So they're having a match, and it was planned as a shoot match, but it was so it was like kind of like outcome unknown. Maybe I'm not sure exactly what the outcome was that they needed, but it was known that they were going to actually be like combating as a real fight. And then Puder puts him in a Kimura, and actually catches him perfectly in a Kimura, pulls him over, and Angle was like in a hell of a lot of pain, and the ref, in order to keep the storyline, came in and pinned Puder with a quick count so that the match ends and Angle wins. Because this like unknown, like Tough Enough guy should not be beating one of the stars on the story. And Angle gets up, and you can see like the anger and the like disbelief in his eyes at like the audacity that this kid would go in, and even in a shoot match, put him in a position where he might actually break his arm or make him tap. Which is just like, that's called like, you have to earn your chops. You can't just like do that. You have to go through the ringer before you're anywhere near likely to become a champ or anything like that.
I mean, one could argue if he does beat Olympic champion, that's
well. So the way that they kind of like equalize that is they put Puder in a 3-on-1 match against Angle, Benoit, and someone else. And if you watch that video, that is a hiding. That is people like literally kicking the shit out of someone in front of everyone. It's obvious. Like they
not holding back?
They punish him. Like they slam him and all this stuff. And it's like, how dare you do that? And that's also
the show, though.
It's part of the show, but it's also for them as the talent. It's like it's a way of being like, don't do that.
And
And
did they hurt him? Like, I mean, obviously
yeah,
everything hurts, but
they hurt him on purpose, and he got what's called buried, where that character
the
is just
Undertaker?
done.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's like
Oh.
buried as a character. Like you will never be a big
Oh
star.
shit! So that ruined his career.
Yeah, no one ever heard of him since, and this was in like 2004.
What happened to him?
I'm not sure.
Oh man, because I didn't know the name. Pewter,
Daniel
but,
Puder, and I think he was like a up and coming MMA fighter, maybe even in the UFC. I think he was actually in the UFC, so he was a legitimate contestant on this Tough Enough show to become a superstar.
Right.
And then they kind of handled him.
Did you watch the Aaron Hernandez documentary?
No, I haven't.
Okay, that's also really good because it a bit explains at least why he was so brutal, and it was actually really good, very interesting. But would you? Okay, because I mean we're getting away. Okay, include wrestling as well, but
it could be anything.
Yeah, it can be anything.
Can be anything.
So I thought about it a lot because I played 1 year of American football.
Okay.
Actually I didn't enjoy it that much. So I thought I would enjoy it a lot. I also played tight end. I didn't like it at all because I was just blocking the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But as a tight end, you're also a bit slimmer. I was than the other linemen. So I was just pushed around a lot. They were much stronger than me, and
like those big linebacker guys. Yeah.
And I remember I didn't like it so much because the coach kept saying like, I don't care if you can calculate or not when you're 30, your head like going in with the head, which in the US is illegal now, and so we were kids, but he didn't care. He was just like block properly, and I hated that. So I did a year. I never did that. So I always used my hands, and that's why I was weaker. Because if you go with the whole body, then you're stronger, right? But so I hated it, and I was just thinking, I love the sports of NFL or football, American football, or MMA, boxing to watch, but I wouldn't want my kids to do it.
It's a tough one, man. I'm the same. I played rugby all the way through school, and I remember some trainers were very forgiving, and they wanted to protect you, and they were like, here's how you do it in order to not get hurt. Yeah. And some of them, especially like the more old school or the ones who had been pros and who were like maybe teaching now because they had an injury or because they, for whatever reason they're now teaching, high level kids, they would be much more like, get in there, like head first, head down, this kind of vibe. And with the scrums, even in the time when I was doing rugby, before it was like, you would have your front row on each side, the two props and the hooker, and you would go in like there was a bit of distance between you. So it'd be like crouch, touch, and then they'd pause and then engage, boom, like that.
Meter away?
It was about, I think it was about a meter when I did it. It was like just under a meter. And that was already like our parents, like when they played rugby, it was probably like 2 meters, like almost like a run up.
Right.
So by the time I did it, it was like crouch, touch, you had to touch, and then you could let go. So it was like touch, pause, engage. And the engage happens from no touch. So it's just like from air, not super far away, but just under a meter, like that. Boom.
But what does that mean? Like shoulder lock? Because you're not headbutting.
Not head to head. So like, let's see, like imagine like the 3 fingers are the heads. So you kind of you interlock like that. Okay. So you go you go like, if you're the guy in the middle, so the guy in the middle puts his arms up like that, and then the 2 guys go one behind and one behind like that. Mm-hmm. And then he puts his arms around them. Uh-huh. So you're kind of interlocked as a 3, they're interlocked as a 3. So then your 3 heads are like slightly offset. Okay. So then this guy goes in between the 2. This guy goes in between the 2, and this guy's outside.
So what's crashing into?
What's crashing is actually the shoulders. Okay. But very often when you have a 1 meter gap, sometimes it would be slightly off, and one person it would be ahead. Right. Or it wouldn't. And this happened all the time. It would just go down. So it'd be like boom, boom, and then the whole thing would collapse. And there's 4 other people behind you. So you've got your 2 locks, the 2 flankers, and the number 8. So very often it would just be like a pylon, and the only person who's not in the pile would be the guy who's right at the back, the number 8. Everyone else is just in this melee of people. So I know that in my time, they were tightening things up, and now even in the professional game, I think the call is something completely different. It's like crouch, bind, set or something like that. So they start not from a distance, and then the engagement is like engage, boom. It's more like crouch, bind. So they're already holding the other guy on the other side, and then it's like set, and then that it's instead of like engage, it's more like start the scrum, as opposed to like explode.
Right.
And that's because like imagine if it was quite bad for me as a kid when I was like a heavier kid. I was prop front row third, like tight head, yeah. So I was probably like, I don't know, at the time maybe like I was quite a heavy kid. I was probably like 80 kilos or like 75 kilos or something. And then there would be like one other guy who's like bigger than me on the other side, and then a shorter, stocky guy who's maybe a bit lighter. The two locks behind us are tall dudes like you, tall and very often like quite big. And then you've got two flankers who are not small, and the number 8 who's also not small. All of that humanity as a kid going into each other, it's like that could be quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Imagine what it's like for the pros. Yeah. So you've got like England versus New Zealand, right, and you're in like the Six Nations, the World Cup match. Yeah. Well, like England versus Scotland, Six Nations, big match. You've got a 1 meter distance between them. You know that as the front row, like it's very vital that we show them our strength, our power. We want to push them back, because when you get in the scrum, you push. It's like a tug of war, and if we push them back and the ball's in the middle, then the ball trickles to our side and we get possession.
Oh, okay,
so it's a huge incentive to push hard. So I can't imagine. I remember how like much it hurt sometimes to be in the middle of the thing when it collapses. Could you imagine with people who are like 120 kilos, 130 kilos, these like huge specimens of dudes, like jacked and like dad bod, like everything. Eight jacked dad bods, and like guys who are like 2 meters tall, like massive people who've done nothing all week but train how to do the scrums. So it's like, of course they change the rules. Right. So, and you see that in the NFL, right? I'm out of the loop with the NFL with like the roughing the passer and roughing the kicker and stuff. Like when I used to watch NFL religiously, it was like late 2000s, early 2000s. Okay. And it was like quite, still pretty like, I think it was like kind of like concussion. I would watch the Houston Texans. I was lucky enough to watch some of their first season. Yeah. And I remember they would have very often, every single game, it would be like a play would happen. And when you're a fan, you're just looking, they're miles away. You kind of just see these little dots. They're sort of just, and then boom, end of play. And then there'd just be like a 20-second delay. The clock would stop, and they'd be like, "We've got a player roughed up on the pitch, so we're going to take a little break." No, the stadium announcer. Oh. He'd be like, "There's a player roughed up on the pitch, or he's had the wing knocked out of him or something." And then they would just be like, and so a chance for a sponsor, and they'd bring like the juice sponsor of the whatever. Half a second later, they've taken him off on a stretcher, and then it's like continue the game. We as fans, I had no idea that guy has basically just had a concussion, probably, right, and is now like fucking seeing stars, and is absolutely like decimated in that moment. And and they're just like, we've got a player shaken up in the play, and it's like, and that's the language. Yeah. So they've changed that now because of these documentaries and all this stuff, and that's a good thing. Yeah. Because is that a good thing though? Okay, so let me ask you a question, because I've done a lot of talking just now. So it's a philosophical equation, right? Because we all know pro wrestling, MMA, NFL, rugby, these are physical games for entertainment, physical games for sport, for reaching the pinnacle of what you can do as an athlete, as a human, whatever. Yeah. And we love watching it. That's why me and you can have endless conversations for hours about this kind of stuff. Yeah. So is there an argument to be made for having a sport where there are concussions and injuries, like, for example, UFC, MMA, NFL, and then should we limit the amount of concussions, or should we ban them altogether, because that's not a good thing to have in our society? Or should we limit the amount of pain and suffering and so on that they'll have later in life, despite the fact that most of the players would probably tell you that they're willing to give their all to become the top.
Yeah.
Like if you interviewed anyone who was in my school or in those kind of circles who now still plays professional rugby and has gone to that level, I bet you they would all have said at the time, I'll do anything to make it to the top.
Right.
Concussion, injuries, I don't care. All I want to do is represent my district, represent my country, go to the World Cup and win the World Cup. That's what people really want. So concussions are kind of like just a part of that. How do you feel about that kind of like philosophical dilemma?
Do they think the same way when they're 60 though? I don't know, man. I've been thinking about this a lot because I love as brutal as it is fun to watch boxing or MMA, but it's super brutal. And also NFL, I love watching it, but I wouldn't play it myself anymore, except for maybe flag football, which is safe. And I would really, if I could decide, I would not let my kids play it, just because of the brain damage. But saying that is also unfair. It's like, oh yeah, you do it. I love watching you destroy. So it's unethical in a way. Especially, I feel bad for those who don't become pros, because if they do turn pro, I mean, they achieved some goal in their life and achieved their dream in a way, and possibly earned a lot of money also, so they're kind of secure in a way. But if you play high school football and you're brain damaged for life, and afterwards you can't really do much, or you're super depressed or super aggressive because of those brain, I don't know, man. It's I don't know.
It's tough, right? Because we are both big fans of these things.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that they're getting less concussions, but I can sort of understand the philosophical side of the other argument, which is it's a game within which that is a part, of which that is a part.
Right.
So you either watch it or you don't. You either participate or you don't.
Right.
It's like, I can understand why people might think that way.
Right.
I don't necessarily think that way. I think it's probably a good thing to limit the serious damage. Like, did you watch Pride MMA back in the day?
That's a Japanese one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was like they literally said, we will not test you for steroids. That you could do things like soccer kicks, like when someone's on the floor, you can kick them in the head.
Jesus.
You could knee people when they're in the head. You could hit them in the back of the head. You could do all this kind of crazy stuff. And at the set, like one part of me says that's barbaric, that's crazy. Yet in the UFC, someone can do a head kick and get a whole shin and smash into the side of your head, or you can do like you can use your elbow and like destroy someone's nose. Right. But so what's the difference between that and hitting someone in the back of the head with a fist? Yeah. That's so like it's an interesting one. There have been some lines drawn, right, and yet it seems a little bit like, put it this way, could there be an argument for a league where anything goes? And then whoever wants to get in, gets in, and whoever doesn't, doesn't.
But then like eye gouging and stuff like that, that's super dangerous.
But isn't head kicks to the back, to the temple super dangerous?
Yes, it is, but then it's like, football, like association football, like soccer, it can be brutal. I mean, compared to these sports, it's not brutal at all. But obviously, it's good to have body checks and, so,
shoulder to shoulder and all that stuff.
Because also it's not brain damaging. And usually you don't get injured from that. So that's like some part of aggression, and you have to fight for the ball. Like, it's part of the game. But yeah, I don't know.
It's tough because you can get brain damage from football, from headers.
That's true.
Some people get really bad brain damage from headering too much.
Every header destroys brain cells, so it's not.
Yeah. I do remember that. Did you play football, soccer? I did as well, and it was like, I remember being I wouldn't quite call it a concussion. I got knocked out once or twice, not playing sport, just like accidents, and it wasn't anything like that level. But I remember every time, like you're taught to like put your whole kind of like head and shoulders and chest into it and stuff. And I remember thinking like, wow, like afterwards, like you have to kind of like shake it off and then just keep going. Yeah. And sometimes with the tackles in rugby, you're encouraged to get low. It's not like in NFL where they teach you to kind of hit the midriff.
Right.
When I went to school, it's very different now. When I was playing rugby, you were told to like kind of like gather the legs and clinch them together, and your head is right down there. And a couple of times I do have a little scar up here, like you just get like clipped by a knee or a thing, and you just kind of like, and then keep going. There's another rock, get on the rock, and it's kind of like oh, that's just collateral damage. That's to be expected. This is that kind of sport.
But that's the danger. That's what I hate, because especially with kids, I feel I also played football in school. I was part of the school team as well, and I also back then did not like taking headers because of that. But everyone told me to, and I thought, like, I just hated that because
you just like,
it's still my brain.
I just want to chest and volley, bro.
But yeah, I tried to avoid it, and because it's so bad for the brain, and my mom also told me that. But would you? I don't know, man. Would you?
Yeah, go ahead.
That's why I love, for fighting, I loved BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because there's less brain. I did feel when someone is kind of pushing, like grappling you onto the floor,
right?
Take over,
a takedown,
and you kind of land badly, then it kind of hurts in the head, though. But that's, I guess, I don't know. It's not a direct hit, obviously, but and you have to learn how to fall also, right?
Exactly. That's the thing I train as well. I always wanted an outlet, and then I realized I didn't want to go back to rugby. I don't want to start fighting, kicking, punching, elbowing, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I always wanted to do something, and I was always obsessed with MMA and the ground battle. It's so interesting when you watch it as just a fan, especially someone who I found MMA through wrestling. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people find wrestling through MMA. Yeah. Not even Lesnar, like way before then, like Tank Abbott, and these kind of like Ken Shamrock. These like people who were doing both way early, in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and even like Steve Blackman, he was like an actual.
Oh, you said that.
He was a martial artist who did WWE, and then there was
wasn't Vaughn John what's his name, Jones?
John Jones? He's not done WWE though.
Didn't he do some stuff?
I don't think so.
Which,
Cain Velasquez has done some WWE stuff, and he's really good. High flying, doing like lucha libre stuff. Cain Velasquez, the heavyweight. But I just wanted to say that it attracted me a lot to do a physical sport that had the kind of fight element, the grappling element, and so on. And you can go 100% with someone and not get the brain damage. If you're obviously there are scrambles, and suddenly, like, you might get an elbow, you get a couple of black eyes, you have an injury, but the purpose of the sport is not to dismember the other person. That's not what it is. It's the purpose of the sport is to make the other person submit, or to choke them out. Both of which will, if you do them within the reason, should not cause you the concussion and the brain damage and all that stuff.
Right.
So that's why I love training that so much.
I think. Yeah, you're right. Oh man, that I love this philosophy of so I told you about this book I read about fighting. So that's why I was like, whoa, I want to learn it. Fighter's Heart, it's called, by Sam Sheridan, really well written, like awesome book. And he writes about how it's so odd because these fighters, when they enter the ring, they're in this kill mode. So they're actually trained to kill someone, but obviously don't want to kill someone. And as soon as the fight is over, they have to shut that off. So it's like this, like, suddenly very aggressive, and then suddenly very loosey, and then you even hug the other guy or whatever, right? Have deep respect for the person, and it's such a, everything's mental, like it's a mental game, and I thought that's so cool about, you said submitting and stuff. It is in that ring, that's your enemy, you have to submit them, but there's this underlying respect the whole time, and obviously before and after you're friendly.
Yeah, I would say like the in my personal experience, it has 98% of the time been two people who are just like, you touch, you shake hands, you do it, and then you're done.
Right.
And then you it's totally cool afterwards.
Right.
Once in a while, there's like a flare up, or you get matched with someone who's just like a bit hot headed or whatever, and that's not usually my temperament either, but of course, once in a while you get dragged into it, and you find yourself in that zone. So it also teaches you to be humble, that sport, because you can't be big-headed.
Right.
I'm lucky in the sense that I was a fan of the sport and a fan of the culture of so on of jiu-jitsu before I got into it, because I knew from day one I'm not going to go in there and just be all right.
Right.
You know,
Right,
whereas
right,
that
right.
you see that a lot, like
Yeah.
big dudes, muscly guys, tattoos and stuff. They come in and they're like, "Oh, like time to impose my will,"
Right.
and they get very, very quickly weeded out, because you have to either change your mentality and realize you know nothing, and people who are half your size, and
Yeah.
maybe even someone who you might think you could just destroy can manipulate you in ways that you don't even know what's going on, and
Yeah.
suddenly you're tapping out, or you're like waking up,
Yeah.
or you act as that asshole for as long as it gets you, and then you get frustrated and leave. And that happens a lot. You see people come and go all the time, and it's really cool when I'm glad that I went in with the mentality knowing I know nothing. And even though I just knew what I knew from watching and there's no practical experience there. I knew a little bit about like tackling from rugby, you know, like getting someone to the ground, and I'd had some like physical
From rugby?
okay.
Okay.
Some like at least some physical contact,
Right.
a contact sport where, you know, there's a lot of shit going on, and it's very physical, but it doesn't translate very well into what I was doing. And it was more like it was very much like a awakening to just go in there and know that you're going to have a sucky couple of years before you even start getting the ball rolling.
What did you get? Did you get it from like Bruce Lee? Because he talked about, you know, be like water, and he talks about all this stuff.
I
Empty
would
cup.
say I just remember, like, I think it was also like just watching podcasts of genuine competitors and people who know what they're talking about, and how they spoke about the beginning and what it was like, and how long it took them to get from zero to get started and all that stuff.
Right.
And I was also a little bit more overweight and not very athletic at the time and all this kind of stuff. So I was kind of thinking, like, it was just so beyond in my mind to go in there with an ego, like, and be like, I'm the big bollocks, I know what I'm doing. So like, again, I think that's just through listening to people who know what they're talking, not specifically Bruce Lee, but just other people like, you know, of course, I wonder how many times we're going to say Joe Rogan on this podcast.
Right.
But it was obviously very useful to listen to him and all the jiu-jitsu practitioners that go on his show, and to kind of realize, like, I know nothing about this, and I only know what I know from being a huge MMA fan, and when they have those ground battles, and that has helped me a lot.
That's a great mindset.
Yeah.
Because I was shocked because I went, I did BJJ for like 3 months or so. I loved it, but I had to stop because of my injury. But
we need to get you back in there, by the way.
I know,
but yeah,
but
keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, I wish, because I love it. I'm so fascinated by it. It's chess
Mm-hmm.
and this strategy, and I was shocked when guys, as you said, half your weight, like they just finish you in a few seconds. And it happened to me constantly. I admired them so much.
It's funny, right?
Yeah.
I was the first few lessons I did jiu-jitsu, I was laughing. It was a comedy.
Yeah.
Maybe that's also why I like being. I'm a comedian. I like making light of things. It's bombing. It's the same thing as bombing, and that's also why when I bomb on stage, which happens often because you're trying new stuff, you're not quite ready, you don't exactly know what you're doing. It happens very often that you bomb, but I know what it's like to bomb physically.
Right.
And it sucks. It's really bad. So like, if you, in my opinion, if I can find a way to get through that and continue doing it for years and years, and then actually start to develop something of a skill, something of a game, then I can completely see how I could do that in anything, including performing on stage, becoming a freelancer, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So that it was a really useful exercise, and I was laughing the whole time, man.
That's awesome, man.
I was like little guys who are like purple belts, brown belts. They're just like playing with you, man.
Oh yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm a heavy dude, and I'm just like, okay, first things first, I'll just like plop on top of them. That's gonna be good. I would do that, and then suddenly he's on top of me doing all this kind of stuff, and I was just like, I had a smile on my face. I was laughing. I never went in there thinking I'm the big bollocks, because I didn't. I honestly didn't.
That's
I
awesome.
knew I knew nothing.
That's a healthy mindset.
Thank you, but
And they
it's
want
just
to train you that, right? They
yeah.
want,
And it's people are very receptive to that. When especially then at the end of the round, you're like, oh, did I do anything right? And they're like, wow, like everything was wrong. But here are some things that you can, like people are willing to help you when you're like that. But if you go in, and I saw it a lot. I saw once. This is an interesting story. This was in the gym I was training in London before I moved here, and it's a really high level gym. Everyone is like legitimate.
Turning pro.
It was like a gym where the goal is to become pro for a lot of these guys, and there was a lot of MMA, kickboxing, Thai boxing, boxing, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And so when you're in that environment as a non-fighter, and I'm just doing jiu-jitsu, I just want to get good at this thing. You do get a bit of that shine because it's such a shark tank that even if you're a small fish, you're still going against these guys who are giving you very little of them. Like they don't need to. They're conscious of how far away you are in the skill level, so they're not going hard. But and very often they'll just like give you a little bit more just to show you like what's who's boss exactly. Okay. They'll let you work, they'll let you do things, and then if you think that you're getting a little bit, and then boom, you get slammed. So I saw once a guy come in for a free trial with his mate, and the son of the trainer was this 15-year-old guy. Okay, he's 15. He had a black belt ability because he's been training since he was 2. In BJJ and in Thai kickboxing. He's like a legitimate like fighter. I think he actually plays rugby now for a rugby union team in London, like legit, like one of the teams in the league. So this is like a very athletic guy who's been training his whole life, and he had black belt level. Of course, he had a blue belt or something on because he's still a kid technically. Right. But I rolled with him a couple of times and it was not nice. This guy does not know what it's like to go light. He just plays with you like you're a toy. And because that's his mentality. He's been trained like that his whole life. He was rolling with one of the guys who was starting. So this is the mindset I didn't quite understand. Like the guy seemed to be really like in his head about like you can see it in someone's face. They're like really kind of like what's going on? And he stood up during the roll. Right, you're rolling with a essentially black belt like enforcer. Right. Like this is the trainer's son, who and you this is your first day in the gym, and this is the attitude the guy had was, I'm trying to become I'm going to try to win this, or something like that. I didn't quite get what he was doing, but he got up and he was like kind of like doing this, and then the 15-year-old who was I say 15, he was big lad, tall, strong, been training his whole life. He just took him down. So he just stood up and did like a double leg, lifted him up, kind of like, they had these hanging bags for punching and kicking. And he kind of like slammed him into the bag because the guy was like resisting instead of like just taking the fall. Yeah. And then they got to the bags where that was the end, and then he just kind of like slammed him down and tapped him. And then they rolled a couple more times and he just like tapped him. And at the end, the guy got up and he was like so emotionally affected by it. He was like kind of like stomping around and stuff, being like, it's my first, in English, like a London, it's like, my first fucking day, mate. What the fuck? and acting like that. And he wasn't big and strong. He was just like normal build, probably like quite athletic, good. Maybe he's a footballer or something. And so the trainer kind of like went over and had a word with him, and he was just like, you stood up, man. You stood up. You're rolling. You're doing a live roll with a trained martial artist, and you stood up. So that's like you're playing the game of I'm going to stand up and then do the next part of this roll. And so the response to that from a fighting perspective, from a guy who's training his whole life is, oh, you're going to stand up? I'll stand up too, and I'll take you down because that's my game. Right. He has a game. So how can you expect that to go any other way? That's what I asked myself. It's like, how did he react? He never came back. He got really emotional, had a shower, and then left. It was his first trial day.
Like ever?
Ever. Had never stepped foot in a fight gym, it seemed. And that's how you conduct yourself. So that's fine. If maybe that's not for him, maybe he'll go and find something else that he's really good at. But I went in there knowing I know nothing, knowing I'm going to get my ass kicked, knowing that it's all going to be a long, long road. And you learn that if you didn't learn it by the time you started, after about 1 or 2 sessions, you're like, whoa, there's levels to this. Even the first session I went in, like the trainer was like, so, okay, we're going to work a technique from, and then I can't remember what the position was at the time, but I didn't know the position, obviously. I've never done anything like this. And he was like, so we take the thing, and it's like, he's like wrapping his leg and da-da-da. And then he's like, so when you're here, you want to release and you're seeing someone who's like in the matrix of his own experience. This is like a 30, 40-year-old vet trainer, been doing it his whole life. And he's explaining it, and everyone's kind of looking like, yep, I understand. Okay, cool. So I'm going to do that. And I'm just like, oh my God, you see the levels instantly. You see how much of a nobody you are and how much of a nothing you have. And that was like a proper like awakening. And all that made me do was like, oh, I just want to be one of these people. Right. I want to have my game. I would love to be a blue belt. I would love to be a purple belt and keep going up like that. It was just like a real like desire to learn. And that involved like a lot of like embarrassment and being like the Muppet and not knowing what you're doing and all this kind of stuff for years and years and years. And I'm still there. I have a little bit of a game now. I can get by with some people, but my game is full of holes, man. I've got nothing but work to do, and we can't even train right now, which sucks.
But you're a blue belt, so I mean, it's not.
I just got the blue belt. Yeah.
Which is the hardest jump? Is it or is it?
People, there's a lot of different schools of thought on that. Like Henner Gracie says that the hardest belt to get is white belt, because it's hard to jump from being someone who's never trained to start training,
good point, actually.
Which is a good point.
Yeah.
And then there's some people who say the hardest is to get from white to blue because it's going from nothing to something. Mm-hmm. And then it's hard. Some people say it's the hardest is from blue to purple, because if you become a purple, it means that the coach sees in you that you have the ability to get all the way to black.
Oh, really?
That's kind of because you're not only like grasping basic concepts, but you're also chaining things together. You're starting to develop your own game. You're understanding your weaknesses and your strengths and all this kind of extra stuff that you have to do. You have to be demonstrating to get to purple. Yeah. So for me, like I know, I have a blue belt around my waist, but I'm a white belt in most of jiu-jitsu, right? I just have a few things that I rely on, right. And I have some size. I'm a heavy guy. I'm strong. I'm relatively athletic. I'm flexible. All of those things that I can control. Right. And then through, I think I've been doing like 5 years or something. It's like I've developed a bit of grit and a bit of an understanding, and that's cool. But I would not say that I'm good. I would not say I'm I will just keep doing it, basically. That's awesome. All I'm going to do. It's just keep doing it. And then I hope that one day all the other stuff will make sense. Right. And that's kind of the mentality we have with this, right? Yeah. It's just we're just going to do this. We just keep doing this, man.
but for sure, like you said, there are probably not so many situations in life where in an evening you lose or fail 20 times. But in a normal sparring session, right, a rolling session, that's what happens.
You're failing constantly.
I was shocked by that. Like I was choked out the whole time, right, by smaller guys, and it felt humiliating. But as you said, you kind of laugh, you enjoy it.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, because you're like, hey, again. And even though you get choked out, and it really felt bad, obviously, because you're like, but it felt good in a way, and I don't mean like a auto whatever it's called.
like a bit of breath play, do we?
I'm not, but but yeah, it was and I remember the first time and only time actually I choked a guy out. Oh my god, it felt so good.
Feels good, right, to get to that point?
Yeah, because you're like, my god, this all paid off.
Do you remember the technique? Do you remember like how?
No, I just remember he didn't do much, so he was a complete beginner. Yeah, but it felt good, and I don't remember what it was. I guess it was. Is it the Kimura where you go under where you have him in your guard and then you go kind of to the side, and then you take the arm and then like,
you sort of hold one arm with one hand, and then you go over their shoulder, and you like loop into your own.
I think that's and then you kind of turn it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the one I did. And then but I thought what I thought was very helpful was I eventually I also thought, or in the beginning, something like that, I thought I don't want to get submitted, and so I wasn't. So this guy I was fighting, I think another white belt, maybe even blue belt, but he eventually he stopped. Like he was like, "I dude, like don't just defend, like do something, because you're not gonna learn anything." And I was like, "Fuck, he's right," because I wasn't being submitted because I was just defending, but I was just being a turtle. I wasn't doing any shit, and then I don't learn shit. And so I wanted to ask you, how do you approach this? Because you said you know some things like a blue belt, but some like a white belt, and I think often what we do well, we just keep doing and we ignore the other things. Do you then on purpose try the things you are bad at so that you get better, but risk submission and losing? Or do you just keep going like, I want to win every single time and I'm going to use my strength?
So for sure, I've had that experience where someone who's experienced, this is when I was maybe like 1 year in or 6 months in, even less than a year, 6 months in. And I was like, okay, I know how to survive. I'll just turtle. If he starts attacking, I'll put two hands on one and then just prevent, basically. And I remember the brown belt who I was rolling with was like, you're not going to learn if you don't try. It was interesting. He was like, I'm going to defeat you. It's like we're prolonging the inevitable. Right. So he wants you to play because he also wants to, or she wants to make sure that their game is as slick as possible. You're a tall dude. You're not an insignificant person. Neither am I. I weigh a lot and I'm like strong and stuff. So it's a useful exercise for them to see what you are like doing your best. And then finding interesting ways for them to get to the defeat. It's practice for them.
Like in boxing, does a multi-year boxer fight against a newbie? No, right?
In what scenario? In the gym?
Yeah.
All the time, I'm sure. I bet you they're constantly doing it. It's the same thing. But it's just levels.
But why does a black belt or brown belt or purple belt fight against a white belt?
It's very, very important.
Is it?
You have to do it.
But why?
Because it teaches you your strengths that you have learned, in the sense that you see someone who's floundering, who's on their first week or their first 2 months or something, and it reminds you how far you've come.
Okay.
And then it provides you with the opportunity to test your game and your weaknesses.
But isn't it too easy?
No.
No?
No.
But imagine you fought thousands of sessions and then you fight against a newbie who's brand new. That's boring. But
what I think is the thing is that you're thinking of it as a fight. It's not fighting, it's training. So you don't go in there with the mentality to win the role. Or some people do. Okay, right. Some people do. Right. But the way I was taught and the thing that I try to keep to is that each role is a rep. It's like doing 100 sit-ups.
But that's the thing. If you train for a while, you won't just do bicep curls with 500 grams. Not even a kilo.
Exactly.
But that's what it is.
But once in a while, when you're like doing muscle training, you'll still go back to what you did when you started. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, yes and no. I guess it's also a part of giving back, right?
That too. Yeah, you're also helping this white belt, and that's another good part of like this kind of cyclical thing. And very often, I'll have a situation where that's where it's useful, where you're rolling with someone who's first day. And they've like wide-eyed and they're kind of like freaking out. And the gym I train at here is also quite intense. There's a lot of like very kind of scary looking people, and like there's people training kickboxing over there. So you'd hear like the bags being hit, like boom, ha, and like so it's quite like I remember when I first walked in, I was like, whoa, fucking hell, where am I going? What am I doing? Right. So someone's like rolling and they're kind of like they're worried, like, oh my god, who's this guy? What's he like? And then if you're just like friendly and nice, and you let them do a bit and you kind of like coach them through it a little bit, it's a useful exercise to help them that they might come back and become training partners and grow themselves. but also it's useful for me because then I realize like I don't have to do very much to beat this person, even though we're like the same size, even though they're maybe as strong as me, maybe they even look more intimidating and stronger and bigger than me. Very quickly, I can just establish a guard, sweep them, get a submission, or do something. Do you know what I mean? Because they don't have any idea. They have no idea. They've never trained anything. They've probably never even had this kind of a physical contact with anyone. So I'm in a huge advantage. And that's a very useful thing to have because I've just done, let's say, 5 to 10 roles with people of varying degrees of size, aptitude, experience. And that's been challenging and then easier and and then I'm faced with this person who in theory shouldn't have a chance, but that's also a different thing that you're getting from it. It's also a benefit for me and for them. And I have this is my mentality is probably not the same as other people, but I don't need to impose myself on this person. I don't have to prove to myself like I can fuck this person up because I don't need that, because I just had a competitive role with this blue belt we've been training together for a year and we know each other's shit, and I had a good one and I was like, cool, I learned a lot from that, so I'll face this with a different mindset. I don't need to be like I could just like smash this person down and really fight to get the thing as quickly as possible, but why would I do that? What do I gain from that? And very often there's like kids, for example, who are like 15, 16 from the kids class who join the adults. Maybe they've been training for a while, but it's a completely different game when they're rolling with someone who's bigger, older, all that kind of, and I also like those roles because it's like a way of seeing someone who's young, who has really good technique, because they've been training techniques for much longer than I have probably, but there's a gap in experience, physicality, strength.
Are they humble?
Mostly. And that's the thing, is I tend to go from a perspective of if someone is acting in a way that I tend to match energy. That's usually how I vibe in life and also in jiu-jitsu. Kind of teaches you like what kind of a person you are as well. Like I'll match it. So like if someone's like super like aggressive and going for the taps and stuff, it will probably push me to get a bit more aggressive than I would be normally. And I don't mind tapping. I'm not someone who's like, I will never tap. You know what I mean? Like there are guys like that and girls. I tend to just kind of, I'm quite okay to admit that you bested me in that one. It sucks. It does hurt a little bit, the ego, but that's a good thing. You let that little bit die and then you continue. Because I remember like there's been a few times where like it felt like a life or death role, and I look back and I'm like, what was that? What was that for? Was who benefited from that? Me or them, or like would it not be better to have 100 productive roles where you're kind of doing back and forth and trying things and and
What's your take on so Bruce Lee? Bruce Lee
you
says,
love Bruce Lee, bro.
Oh, dude,
yeah, of course, yeah.
Obviously, legend.
Yes.
He says, "Don't fear a guy. I don't fear a guy who practiced 5,000 moves one time. I fear the guy who practices one move 5,000 times."
Exactly. So to your point, when you said, is it not bad to go against someone where you're so much better? It's like, no, because it's another rep. And it's a rep where you can do it to the best of your ability and that person cannot resist. Okay. So it's just one more of the 5,000.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to cut you off.
So it doesn't, okay.
It doesn't matter who it is.
Right.
You're still
but
doing...
You're practicing that move again.
Or whatever you're practicing against them, you'll probably be able to do it because they have no idea what they're doing.
So I don't mean, obviously it's good to get another rep, but isn't it better to get a rep against another same level belt than a white belt?
They're different because with the person who is much smaller than you, less strong, and more inexperienced, then you can just try your thing.
Right.
But if the person is the same size as you, the same experience, and the same strength, then that's like a real test, because it's like that's someone who you might compete against in a competition. Then there's also someone who's like much bigger than. This happens a lot. Like someone who comes in that's just a beast. Physical beast. And like I'm not just tapping them. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a certain point of diminishing return where my skill level and my size has to match up with his skill level and his size.
Right.
So if he's like 2 meters tall and 20 kilos heavier than me and a bodybuilder, and maybe he wrestled a bit in high school, then my 5 years of jiu-jitsu and my size and my height doesn't stack up to his necessarily.
Right.
So we'll have a very competitive role, even though it's maybe his first week trying jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And then sometimes you'll get people who are like huge specimens, but they're not very athletic, or they've only ever done weight training.
Right.
So that person, again, they're not very flexible usually. So you can do things with flexibility. There's other little tricks and stuff that you can do. We need to get you back in there, man.
It's like a snake, I feel like, very often. You know, they just like find a way to entangle you.
Right.
That's how it feels.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Yeah.
And
I'd love to join, man. It's
absolutely.
so much fun,
Come and just do a trial with no sparring, none of that.
Yeah.
Just drilling and.
But like, you know, it just popped out so often, and you know.
I feel like you could learn some things that are like they're quite annoying when you like I do them. They're like these little kind of tricky things where you can put someone in a position like the lockdown. You have long, strong legs and a big, strong body, so you can put them in a lockdown where you're kind of controlling them, and you're also not crazily attacking or defending. You're kind of just like you're holding them, and then your shoulders are kind of like free in a way, and you can get a lot of submissions and kind of like there's a huge encyclopedia of stuff you can go from there.
Like, I don't know. I feel very uncomfortable when my arm is like this.
Right.
And if they like do one move, like it pops out.
But again, you can also tell someone like I've got a funny shoulder.
But then
like
I felt bad because
this goes back to feeling bad too much, bro. You just tell them. Just tell them like I've got a bit of a strong.
I was apologizing. I was like, I'm sorry that you can attack this side. I'm sorry. I wish you, And they're like, they were cool about it.
Of course they were cool about it.
Yeah.
Because that's cool being cool.
I get. That's another thing. I was shocked. I was honestly shocked, surprised that people were so friendly.
Jiu-jitsu people, 99% of the people who I've met are the nicest people.
But even MMA, boxing,
oh yeah, just actual people who are into fighting.
They're all like aggressive people and want to let it out, show other guys who's the boss and stuff. But I mean that also happens. But as you said, they're usually weeded out very quickly.
There's a bit of that,
or the girls, and they're so humble. They're super friendly. Their coaches are awesome.
Mm-hmm. It's because most of those people know that they don't need to be the Billy Big whatever. Like they can just they're comfortable in their own skin, and they know that you walking in, they have no idea who you are.
Right.
You might be some crazy ninjutsu black belt who's been training for 30 years.
What's ninjutsu?
It's just like another type of martial art that's like got some parallels. But for like I can't make an assumption based on your size, based on your ethnicity, based on your skill, your strength, nothing. I know nothing until we start rolling.
I looked at Adesanya.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last Airbender. He loves Avatar, so it's the something Airbender, right? His name.
Stylebender.
He loves. I think he loves like anime stuff, right?
Yeah.
Stylebender, but when you see his body. He's not that like muscly. Like he fought against the Brazilian guy, Costa.
Yeah. Costa looks like a superhero.
Right.
Yeah.
He looks like Jack. And then you think, oh, fuck, there's no chance. And then Adesanya just beats him.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so cool how, it doesn't say shit.
Dude, have you seen Roy Nelson?
Roy Nelson? No.
He's like a heavyweight. He was in UFC, now he's in Bellator. He has a belly, a big beer belly, and he has like a mullet, and he doesn't look like someone who you would necessarily think is one of the baddest guys on the planet. But he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Right. He's fought for the title in the UFC. He's one of the most kind of he's definitely got a cult following, a fan following as a really, really good fighter. He won the Ultimate Fighter. He beat loads of people, beat Brendan Shaw, beat like legit competition. This guy is like one of the most legit heavyweight competitors there's been in the UFC. And he's got like what you would probably call a gut or like a beer belly, because that's just his physical makeup. Right. Do you know what I mean? Right. It's got nothing to do with...
That's true.
like you could make the argument, would he be better if he cut that and then went to a lower weight? Who knows?
Right.
But just as he is, that's it. There's no you cannot. That's one thing I learned from 1 week in jiu-jitsu. You cannot make any judgment on anyone about size.
Right.
You maybe when you were young, you used to walk down the street and be like, I could take him. You know, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of people who are like that. I definitely had a part of me that was like, well, I'm a big, slightly bigger guy. I played rugby. I'm good.
Oh yeah,
I'm not. I realized very quickly I'm not good.
Yeah. There's this assessment always like, will he attack me? I do think sometimes, right? And then I mean, I definitely remember in school, you know, kids would pick on, like, not bad, but I wouldn't call, I don't know, mobbing, but definitely teasing a lot, and you know, yeah, I guess it's a part of mobbing. But anyways, I definitely realized as soon as I did hit a growth spurt and also got big, like wider, they do less of it because they just back off, you know. And so I really want my kids, and that was a problem for myself too, because I started eating more because I knew that I get attacked less. But that went overboard, you know. Like I love food, but I went overboard because I thought I have to get bigger so that they don't attack me or. But I want my kids, all of them, to really learn fighting just so that they can defend themselves, and also I feel like fighters have this exude this calmness and confidence, and so you don't also get attacked that much because people don't want to mess with you. They just feel like, okay, this person, no. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I've had like really good conversations with my trainer who's been training forever, like 3 Dan black belt. This is like a so in jiu-jitsu.
Oh, there's also Dan?
Yeah, once you become a black, people say that that's when the fun really starts. Because then there's levels way above black up to like red coral belt. There's like yeah. So he's someone who's like not physically huge, very slim, obviously very athletic, like cut body, but he says that he has a lot of people who he gets this kind of vibe of like, I could take him kind of thing. And he knows in his heart of hearts that he doesn't need to step up to it.
Right.
So that's that calmness.
Yeah.
This guy is like a tried and tested savage.
Doesn't he have to legally say he's a weapon? Because isn't he a weapon? I think by German.
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
But don't you? I mean, if you get like a brown belt, I'm pretty sure if you get in a street fight, you have to tell the other person, look, I have a black belt or a brown belt.
I feel like you just naturally would. I think if you were like if you were having an altercation, unless it just happened quickly,
right?
I think he would be like, do you really want to do this?
I guess. And if you really say it calmly, the other person just backs off.
Yeah. And all you need to do is spot the ears. Look at the ears. If you can see someone's got those cauliflower ears,
right.
That's a dangerous person. Like whether they play rugby, whether they play whether they're wrestler, whether they're jiu-jitsu, MMA, boxing, like
you
all
get them from chess.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh shit. That's a good point. But,
yeah.
I mean, would you let your kid? Oh, for sure. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I like any kids I have, I would definitely get them into some sort of a martial art. I think jiu-jitsu is a great one because there's nothing more endearing and adorable than watching the kids class at a gym. It's like, I think like ages like 5 to 12 or something, and they're in their little gis and they're learning the movements. They're not like going crazy. They're just learning how to roll, how to frame, and all that stuff. And then when they do their sparring, they're trying things, you know, they're going for it, but they're doing it in this very controlled atmosphere with the trainer, and they've been taught like the respect, the handshake before and after. They learn how to shake hands at the end of the training session. And I would much rather my kid be in that scenario than doing those things on the street or like with other friends at their houses and stuff, where like I remember when I was a kid, because we were like wrestling fans, we would have like full-on fights.
Wrestling fans?
Yeah.
Wrestling fights?
Thinking like, because at the time where it was still blurry whether it was real or not, we would do like, we would set it up, we would make a ring, we would do like swanton bombs off the top and like ankle lock and crippler crossface and all this shit. Like, would you not rather your kid is in a gi training, becoming something?
Right.
Like instead of just doing that, like.
Yeah.
like
Don't they also say? Don't they have the disclaimer? Or used to at least?
yeah,
like,
they still
this is my
do.
profession. Oh, okay.
Yeah, like just like when they put the thing on the cigarette pack that says this
Right.
kills you. Like cigarettes have never sold better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
People are still smoking.
Right.
It made you almost like, oh, this is dangerous.
Yeah.
And we used to do like power bombs,
Oh,
pile drivers, DDTs, the whole thing, man.
What's DDT again?
When you like put the person like a headlock, but from the front, and then you
And then go down.
go down.
Wait, Triple H has his own version of
The
it.
pedigree through the legs.
Yeah, and then he puts the arms up.
Yeah.
And then jumps down.
And then boom. We used to do that all the time.
But that's so dangerous.
I know. That's what I'm telling you, bro. Like, you asked me like if I would put my kids in that. I would definitely do that to try and encourage them not to do the backyard stuff. You know what I mean?
Dude, best finisher.
Oh, that's such a tough question. Because can we split it into sections like most effective if it was a real fight, and then like most entertaining. Yeah, because there's two different ones, right? Because like the worm, Scotty Too Hottie. Do you remember? He would like go like, like jumping on one foot and then do like the worm, and then do like a karate chop or like the people's elbow.
No, I can't even watch it.
Yeah, of course.
So we have the screen set up. Actually, we didn't use it until now.
We haven't used it, but
damn.
We've got this set up, and obviously, like at some point, we're gonna figure this out to get maybe some picture-in-picture or whatever. Do you remember? Do you not remember Too Cool with Rikishi? Rikishi was like in this group with these two guys, Scotty Too Hottie and Grandmaster Sex A, with an A.
No,
I'm serious.
Wait, wasn't Rikishi Umaga? Are they the same?
No, they're just related.
They are related.
Umaga's dead, man. R.I.P. He died like 5 or 10 years ago.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Cool.
Scotty Too Hottie.
That was a massive guy. Something Henry. Bobby Henry?
Mark Henry.
Man, he was like all these guys are so massive. I remember some fights. Oh, dude, I'm so excited about that. Like, did you like I remember I watched I think it was Great Khali versus
Tajiri. Tajiri. He had the green mist that he would like spit on people. Dudley Boys, man. Test also passed away, man. Rest in peace.
Why do they die so early?
Probably related to what we were talking about earlier. So, dude, here it comes, right? One of the most devastating moves in all of sports entertainment. This is William Regal, Tajiri and Scotty Too Hottie versus the Dudley Boys and Test.
Oh, wow, that's a great kick.
You know, William Regal is the general manager of NXT.
Oh. I mean, I have massive respect for Vince McMahon. Mayon?
And McMahon. I like them both. Vince McMahon and Vince McMahon. Here we go.
Him and his wife, they built it. It's so big, right? Like he.
It's a family thing, man. It's his grandfather.
His grandfather.
So it goes way back.
Obviously. Vince.
He made it global.
Global, okay.
National, then global. This was it as well. That was a great move.
What?
The Mist. Did you see the Mist? So here we go.
Oh, wow. What a kick.
I don't know if we're going to see the worm here, but.
Oh,
Tajiri was so sick.
The fight was September 13, 2001. Like 2 days after they actually fought?
Of course. The WWE does not miss a show.
After such a huge event?
This is it, the worm.
Oh.
Here we go.
Oh, he's shouting. Okay. Here
we go. WORM.
Oh, he's doing the worm.
And then you go, ooh, poop. It's like all that showboating.
Now he's got hit. Do you think that you could do that in a street fight?
I definitely did it in my bedroom.
Can you do the worm?
Yeah, bro.
You can do the worm?
Of course.
Oh, I can't do it.
Well, that should be a segment, like learning how to do the worm.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, that's a cool.
So that's a cool one. That's like and obviously the people's elbow.
People's elbow.
The Rock's people's elbow.
Oh yeah, but again, that's also very entertaining.
Yes. So like actually painful, like devastating moves. I mean, I'm thinking of like another one that's like, it seems like it would be legitimately painful.
Wait, what does he do? So he kind of gets the band off his thread.
He throws the band,
Right,
and then
can
he was
you
like,
he's iconic, man.
he's transcended everything. I think he's going to be president, low key.
Really?
I think he's going to be president.
Dude, imagine from wrestler to, I mean, also a former president already entered the WWE ring, right? Trump. So that wouldn't be the first time. Wow! Oh man, people go crazy. He was a bit bigger back then. Like,
No, he's bigger now.
No, but in terms of fat, doesn't he?
Oh, okay, yeah, fat. So here we go, doing the people's elbow on the head. That was like Al Snow's character that he was like obsessed with this weird like mannequin head.
Oh, okay. Oh my god. What? So why did he become so popular? I mean, was there a specific thing?
He was just so good on the mic, such a presence.
Yeah.
And they gave him the opportunity to be silly and
Right.
become
So he was
a
funny
thing.
too, right?
Hilarious, man.
But is it written for them? I'm sure part of it. Right?
So I think, like, from my understanding of watching the behind the scenes and the people who've left the WWE who do interviews and stuff, they say that one of the problems with it right now with the product is that it's too scripted. They expect you to use these buzzwords and keywords that seem a bit old school and kind of don't feel natural.
Right.
Whereas like in AEW, they can kind of just go off the cuff and be themselves and perform, improv and be like a.
Have you seen Louis Theroux?
Of course, yeah.
So he does from BBC. He does a lot of documentaries about people, right? Groups of people.
I love Louis, man.
Amazing.
Great.
One of the best journalists of all time. And then one time he goes to wrestling. Have you seen that one?
I don't think I have,
Okay. It's very interesting because he goes not to the WWE, but like a low-key, smaller federation, trying to, like, up-and-comers.
The independent
so
circuit.
Far removed, yeah. And it's brutal. Like, they're actually bleeding because they fight with, like, thorns.
And barbed wire and thumbtacks and all that stuff,
And just, like, for 50 people or something. It's kind of brutal, but you see the passion in the people and stuff. And I think there was a segment where he also shows how they train, and the training was also because I think he might actually go to the WWE or a bigger one, and shows how they train the young ones. And it's not just physical training, but mic training. Like they look into the camera and they do their shtick, like on Saturday we're gonna fight, like that stuff.
The promos, man.
Yeah, exactly. And so fun. It's
so
cool.
That's a huge part of the NXT behind the scenes and all that stuff, because you have to not only be a physical performer, you have to be able to cut a promo. And there's some people who don't get far because they can't. They can't. They're not good on the mic.
Like who?
I don't want to name names. Yeah.
So John Cena is obviously, because he even raps, right? Or does like these rap battles.
I think the story with that from an interview I heard is that he wanted to. They were on a bus and he was just doing it as a laugh, and then one of the higher ups was like, "Do that on the show."
Right. So it's actual real.
He's actually got that kind of skill.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing.
I think they always try and make your character an excessive version of who you really are.
Right.
That's the best one.
Right. Dude, so John Cena, the person, he actually learned Mandarin. I listened to it and it's pretty good.
For the films, because he's out there filming, right? Doing movies?
Yeah, he's doing movies, but I think, because the WWE wanted to enter China, and then he went there to give a speech, and he, I think, spoke for 20 minutes in Mandarin.
Whoa!
And yeah, the tones, because I speak a bit, like the tones weren't always perfect, but, like everyone was impressed, obviously, because, incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I guess like he probably spent his whole, like a serious amount of time learning it.
But still, like, he's such a busy person. So
it's very impressive. He's someone I really look up to as like a grafter, man. That guy's just a hard worker.
And also, I mean, The Rock, all of them.
Yeah.
How can you look like that at 45 or 50? Or he's not that old, but, like, I want to have a body like that at 45, 50.
Yeah.
Or Vince, he's 70, 75.
Yeah, and he's still a specimen.
Dude.
I mean, they just go to the gym every day, work out every day, eat right, do everything right, the best possible training, the best possible everything, and they just do that every day with no pause. Yeah,
that's mentally very important.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, man. I feel that way looking at the some of the jiu-jitsu guys and like the people even in my gym who are like a bit older, they've got families, they've got kids, they've got jobs, and they're like maybe not even like they're very good, but they're not the top people in the gym. And I look at them and I'm like, damn, like I want to have that kind of hunger forever.
Right.
I would never like to stop doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I just read, because I read some BJJ books actually, because I was really, I was into it that 2 months or so I was doing it, and this guy was saying he like fought against one of the original Gracies, the OG. Like he was 90 at the time, but he still couldn't submit him because he was so old already that he couldn't really fight back, like submit this guy. But he knew how to defend it. Like he was, yeah. And so even at 90, he had this passion and training regularly. And I mean, if you look at monks, sometimes they're like, super frail looking, but they actually can break through a wall, right? And,
dude, the gym I train in is affiliated to a gym back in Brazil that's got a huge name, and they're run by this guy called Julio Cesar, Master Julio Cesar.
Like keeper of Inter Milan back then?
Yeah, it is, right? Julio Cesar.
I think so, yeah. That's a cool name, Julio Cesar.
Yeah. And he has the black and red belt. So it's one level above black, not quite coral. But he's like an older guy. He's been doing it for 50 years or 60 years or something. And he had a fight, a jiu-jitsu fight in the IBJJF like international competition, and it's the first time a person of that level has ever actually competed in a tournament. Because it's like that you would think that they're maybe a little bit too old, or they're kind of just teaching or whatever, and he won.
Damn.
Against a much younger competitor just because of the skill and technique, and that was like a huge thing in Brazil. Like everyone was like, oh my god, mind blown. Like that's someone who you can just look at that and be like, wow, that's amazing. And he's done a couple of seminars here. I've been so lucky to shake his hand and so on. It's been really, really cool.
Why is BJJ with the World Cup is very often in Abu Dhabi, right?
I think they have a whole circuit in Abu Dhabi, like for IBJJF, and also the Grand Prix and all this other stuff.
Is it because one of the royals, I think, is super into BJJ?
It must be something like that, some kind of a connection.
Okay, because why isn't it not in Brazil if it's from there? Or even in Japan, I think BJJ is not that big, although Jiu-Jitsu is Japanese.
I think the originals, but it developed a lot when they moved it to Brazil.
Okay. Yeah. Dude, I really gotta...
Yeah, let's do a pause. Yeah, let's do a pause.
Should we?
Cool.
Should we do
yeah, man.